Hi, everyone. Nate here. Just a quick heads up that if you enjoy What a Hell of a Way to Die, you can access bonus content in which we publish a new episode every week on our Patreon. The link is in the show notes, and for $5 a month, you get access to all the bonus content we've put out since we started the show back in 2016. Hope you enjoy, and thanks for listening.
Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. Glory, glory, what a hell of a way to die. He ain't gonna jump no more.
Hey everybody, welcome to another episode of What a Hell of a Way to Die. It's Nate and Francis. Nate, it's April. I woke up and it was like 65 degrees. Now look, you lived in the Midwest. You know you can't let your guard down in April, but it feels like finally, unlike Afghanistan, we're turning the corner.
Yeah, opposite here. So last time we were recording, we were having beautiful weather, and it is now fucking cold here. It is, I want to say something along the lines of probably in the like high 40s here. So yeah, we went from last Tuesday, Cynthia and I went on a walk because it was like 73 Fahrenheit. It was like 22, almost 23 Celsius. Now it's, I think, yeah, we're like, it's not getting above 10 Celsius. So I think 10 Celsius is right around 50-ish degrees. So yeah, it's fucking cold. And
which isn't bad for April, but it's also not great for April.
Yeah, I remember being on FTX when I was a RTC cadet in weather like this, where it's like in the 40s and windy and it just fucking sucks. Like it's not freezing, it's not wet, but it's just, yeah, just blustery, you know what I mean? Just it's no fun. That being said, I germinated a ton of pepper seeds. They're all on a tray getting some grow light right now. And so when it does finally warm up, you know, I've got all my stuff prepped for growing. Yeah, some bell peppers, some Peruvian ají chilies, some jalapenos, some serrano chilies, some tomatoes, and some cucumbers. So I'm hoping that with the hilarious growing season in the United Kingdom, where like it starts being crisp fall weather on like September 1st on the dot. I'm hoping that I've better gamed the growing season. And I also know from experience last year that you absolutely have to use cloches over plants at night because it just gets fucking cold. Even when the weather's warm, like temperate in the daytime, it genuinely is too cold. Like it'll cause plants to start getting like weird knotty growth and stuff because, you know what I mean? Like knots and clumps and stuff because they're too cold at night. So yeah, adapting.
Much like the British physique, the plants just come in all like weird and broken. It's like, time to go take over an African country. The idea of all British people just being super mutants from Fallout 3 is just what I base myself on. Like kind of fucked up, but also extremely overpowered.
Yeah, man. Well, like I said, what always makes me laugh here is just the extent to which the adage is true about, you know, your house plants are allergic to tap water and they'll die, and your plants in the garden, like, oh, the wind blew slightly stronger than normal, the plants all died, but then the weeds are like, oh yeah, like a chipped off segment of wood paneling, a crack in the cement, like the space between bricks and plaster on an outdoor wall, like hell yeah, I'm gonna grow a whole fucking forest here. Like yeah, it's just endless fight against the goddamn weeds.
And you know, our botanical garden has an English garden in it, and I love the English garden, but also it's just walking through it, it's like, how do you have farmlands there? Like how are you a world power? How is England like, and genuinely, like, I do wonder that because, like, you know, it doesn't have, like you're saying, the growing season is kind of weird and fucked up. So I imagine it's hard to do, you know, large grain crops, and I'm sure there's people who actually understand, you know, British agriculture better than I do, but because I'm surrounded by corn and soybeans in the fucking the Midwest, and I'm sure as soy as England would like to be, it can't be as soy as me, baby.
Yeah, I was gonna say that's the one thing that's so funny about the people. You know, there are all these dumb associations with soybeans, and it's like, and soy stuff that like has become an alt-right cultural thing, but actually, yeah, if you're from the Midwest, like fucking soybeans and corn, the crop rotation, like we grow with that stuff.
The people online that concern themselves with soy in milk making people effeminate are not the same people who live in like fucking Mountain Grove, Missouri, and or just trying to get by. Like there's not that much crossover between those two people, and they're just like, yeah, I grow soybeans because the Chinese buy it, and then I make money, so everybody's happy. Like, you know, the idea of global commerce is this scary thing that Republicans cry about, but yet Missouri like requires us to sell shit to China to survive as a state. So, you know, let's not do that.
I mean, I'm just reminded of one of our mutuals, who I won't name because I don't want to put pressure on him in any capacity, but pointing out one time that he's a onion farmer. Like he farms in Ohio. Like farming is his life and his job. It's all he's ever done. And he's like, I'm constantly being called a beta male by guys who are, you know, shaped like candle wax droppings, and their gaming chair permanently smells of their ass. And he's like, literally, I fucking farm shit. Like I go to the gym and lift after I fucking spent all day farming. And it's like, yeah, it's just, I can't, and this never bothers me, but the absurdity of the situation, like, it's just a thing I have to make comment about. And
it is,
yeah,
for every prepper. If you're out there and you're not following Neolithic Cyborg, they are a person living mostly off of the grid, and they were watching a lot of Doomsday preppers and like commenting on it, and how like every Doomsday prepper is really just prepping for their own death, just later than the rest of us. Because there's no like, okay, here's how we're going to agriculturally, you know, deal with this, and here's how we're going to. It's like, I'm just going to store MREs in my basement and hope they last for 5 years. After that, fuck if I know, you know.
Yeah, exactly. Well, I was going to say too, you know, here we're in a situation with, you know, a lot of the stuff because of Brexit. People have been saying that like, oh, we're actually going to be food independent. It's like Britain hasn't been food independent since the Middle Ages. Like, it hasn't been self-sufficient in that regard because. Yeah, I mean, obviously there's tons of agricultural land here and they grow a ton of stuff here, but we've been dependent on food imports for forever, you know, both for meat and for other products. And, you know, there's certain stuff that can't grow here, just isn't commercially viable to grow here. And so, yeah, I mean, I think that it is always hilarious when you think about this, the British notion of being like, we're, you know, Britannia rules the waves or whatever the fuck. And it's like, a little more complicated than that, but, you know, go ahead and entertain yourself with that. It's the same thing as, you know, our sort of weird American nationalism kind of fixation on this idea that, you know, we do everything better than everyone else. And it's like, well, we used to be pretty good at some things, but we, you know, the people who make the decisions in our economy determined that, you know, they could take home, you know, 10 times as much of the skimming off the profits off the top if they moved their entire supply lines to, you know, either Central America or to China. And as such, we don't really make shit. I mean, we do make some stuff in America, but nothing on the order of what we used to. And
yeah, I mean, therein lies our problem. We're not an industrial nation anymore. We're just a nation that has a bunch of like burned out steel husks of steel mills that kids can run around and smoke weed and break shit.
Well, I mean, the thing is, we do make stuff. It's just that we don't make stuff the way that we used to. We don't make consumer goods the way that we used to. You know, we still make heavy equipment. We still make specialty equipment. We still make things like cars. But if it were up to people like Mitt Romney, for example, they're like, no, the American car industry should die because we don't think it's efficient. And you know, invariably, it's the senior folks who, you know, basically direct the American economy don't think that it matters for us to make stuff. But then, you know, obviously you see the ramifications of that when, for example, last year we couldn't get any protective equipment because none of it's made in America, and our supplies in America, you know, they had just been letting them rot for 2 decades. So sure enough, none of that worked either. You know, I just think that I look at some of this stuff and it's always funny because there is, this romantic notion of who we are and what we do and what we make. And that doesn't have any real bearing on reality. And it hasn't for a long time. But
I always have to remind myself of, like, I go back to that Daily Mail graphic of like Brexit food that you will and won't have. And like the things that it's like avocado toast and banana smoothies. You're not going to have that because most UK food is imported. But then it's like peas, carrots, and beetroots. You can eat as many of those as you want because we got lots of that. Egg on toast with a glass of milk. Ooh, that's a Brexit meal right there. You will have mutton, but you won't have ham. Apparently, there's no pigs there. Toast and chips, lobster and chips, but not cod and chips because battered cod also often comes from Norway and Iceland. And it's just like a very like Man, even like food wise, you guys, like England wants to shoot itself in the foot. Which, I mean, sure, like why not? England conquered most of the known world just trying to get cinnamon, so it makes sense that it's just like pizza. Get that shit out of here. That tie nonsense.
Yeah, I mean, which is funny because I would say I've actually had very good pizza in the UK, mostly because it's oftentimes made by Italians because there's a lot of Italians in this country. But
it's hard to fuck up pizza. It can be done, but it's hard to do.
And I would say also that just because of the fact that there's so many Italians here, and pizza, I think took off later here in popularity than it did in America, in terms of like how recently you get way more of the sort of wood-fired stuff here. Like it's when you think about what your standard, kind of like average pizza is in America, outside of major cities, it tends to not be the like wood-fired style stuff because like that's more faddish. And it's getting more popular in America, but like when you think about what we grew up with, like the Domino's, Pizza Hut, Papa John's kind of shit. It's not fucking wood fired. There's just like specialty machinery to make like 1,000 of them an hour. You know what I mean? Like every Papa John's is just like a stack room with an assembly line.
Hell yeah, and it's good as shit.
No, it's fucking not. No, it is not. No, it is, bro. There's Papa John's here. I've been to one once with a friend. There's one on the road that I cycle past. So in like back before we moved offices, there were two that I'd pass on my way to the office. And I'm telling you, I cannot describe how fucking weird it is to be like, I'm in Europe, driving on the left side of the road or cycling on the left side of the road. It's a foreign country. Everything's different. But then I go past this one spot and it's the exact same smell as the one at the fucking same plaza where Marsh was at in Westfield, like north of 146th Street in Hamilton County, Indiana. Same exact smell. Exact fucking, like, it's uncanny. And it tastes just as bad. And the butter sauce tastes just as bad here as it did in Indianapolis, in Carmel, in Westfield, in Noblesville in like fucking 1997. It's wild to me.
Yeah, do you understand how difficult it is to maintain that level of quality even across an entire ocean? That the pizza you buy in Bloomington, Indiana is the same pizza, the same Papa John's pizza that you know and love with that beautiful garlic butter dipping sauce in London. It's hard. And that's why Papa is the Papa, and that's why the day of reckoning is coming.
Exactly. And
the pizza reckoning is coming.
That's the thing. He had to work so hard to make sure that the pizza tastes just as much like shit in London, England as it does, in fucking Fishers, Indiana, or, New Albany, Indiana, or Versailles, Kentucky. He had to work so hard at it that he didn't have time to focus on his own life and stopping using the N-word on a constant basis. He's only getting around to that now because he was working so hard on the pizza.
This is why, I mean, he's so intense. It took 20 months for him to say slurs to get all the slurs out. Like, some of us never get all the slurs out. But him, he just sat down pizza after pizza, yelling slurs until they all got out of his system. It's an impressive feat. But Nate, speaking of slurs, you are an officer, and you were an officer, and I was enlisted. We are both past tense soldiers, even though technically I'm a soldier for life, according to the retired soldier pin that I got.
And technically, I could be recalled in a national emergency because as an officer, you could sort of. It hasn't really happened in a long time, but you could.
No. They could recall me too. Like, I'm technically, it's like how people that are medically retired are still in the Army, and it's just mostly for paperwork tracking necessities. So, but we know the enlisted folks. We know that overall enlisted folks are, especially the younger ones, the young guys out of the house for the first time, out on their own. They've got a steady paycheck. They're meeting friends, and they get to do stuff like run 5 to 10 miles a day and shoot shit. So, like, in what way is that not just like the American dream for any male under the age of 35? But understandably, some officers don't like that. And to such a point that one officer at the Yokosuka Naval Base wrote a complaining letter about the enlisted folk that he was forced to live around. And Nate, this man sounds like an insane, crazy person.
It does. So I always want to read the article because I feel like getting it in context makes it so much more, I don't know, it's like a wine pairing, of just insane and entitled. Like, it's just, and let's just preface this by saying that anyone who's ever had any contact with the U.S. Navy knows that the officer enlisted split is just like baked into their DNA. And the level of separation and, in my opinion, contempt that the officers have for the enlisted in the Navy is unbelievable. It's so unreal. The Air Force is pretty bad about keeping officers and enlisted separate and making them into like their own little fiefdoms. But my God, the Navy is so much worse.
Yeah, the Army, for all of its faults between officer and enlisted, at least, you know, you interact with officers on a fairly regular basis. But the Navy and the Air Force and the Marines, it really feels it's very separate. It's very segregated.
You don't have a separate mess hall for officers in the Army. I have never, ever in the time that I was in the Army, ever once been in a situation in which like there was like a segregated area for officers versus enlisted. For food, that kind of thing. I have had it happen for sleeping, but that was because the staff officer cycle, they were like, we need to put these people in a place where like people are going to be able to sleep during the day because we're running 24-hour talk ops. That's the only time I've ever seen. And it wasn't like we had a nicer space. We just had a separate space. And I saw that once in Korea. Other than that, though, we were always in the same tents. We were always in the same dining facilities. Whatever the soldiers were eating, we were eating. Like, it didn't matter. You know what I mean? Like, there was no separation. So with that being said,
and I will say there is at a certain level, like, you know, you're not going to be staying in the same tents as like maybe the majors or the lieutenant colonels and stuff. They'll probably have their own space, but in general,
company grade and below. And I mean, like, obviously, like let's be perfectly honest here. Housing, like permanent housing, absolutely is not only segregated, but there's an incredible difference in quality between what enlisted soldiers and officers get, and senior NCOs and officers. Like when you get in a quarters situation where it's like E8 and above or 03 and above, or like you said, 04 and above, like, yeah, it'll for permanent housing or like a TDY assignment. Absolutely. It'll be nicer. So like, don't get me wrong. I'm not saying that the Army is egalitarian. I'm just saying the Navy makes the Army seem egalitarian by comparison. So an officer at Yokosuka Naval Base is under investigation for purportedly writing a complaint to the base housing office about the, quote, deviant nature, unquote, of enlisted sailors who pose a danger to his family. This letter, allegedly authored by Lieutenant Nathaniel Allison of Naval Hospital Yokosuka. Now, lieutenant in the Navy is a captain in the Army, 03. States that living in the Ikago housing detachment in an apartment building for enlisted families is, quote, unacceptable, unquote. The message, filled with spelling and grammatical errors, condemns enlisted sailors as, quote, perverts, unquote, and accuses them of egregious behavior such as rape, involvement in drug cartels, and attacking each other with hatchets. There are often drunken and often hostile sailors hanging around enlisted housing, the letter states. Housing with enlisted greatly increases the risk to my family. I have a good-looking family, a wife of 2 daughters, ages 3 and 4. They are prime targets to be victims for these enlisted deviant activities, unquote.
Okay. First off, hatchet fights. Absolutely believe that's happening. 100% believe that at some point in time he saw somebody, you know, like, and you know, there's like, you go to the PX and there's that one aisle at the PX full of dumb shit that every wannabe operator buys from. That's just like K-bar knives and look at all this cool stuff. And you can buy an axe there. And then you always have that asshole. I don't know if you ever had the axe asshole when you were deployed. Just a guy who has like a quote tactical axe attached to his kit for some reason. So I believe that. I believe that in Japan, the enlisted folks are getting drunk and attacking each other with hatchets. Involvement in drug cartels, probably. I just really wonder, like, how he's getting this, like these are all things that I would like. Yes, I would assume things like this would happen, but he seems to have proof of some kind. Like he's seen drug cartel stuff, he's seen rape, and he's seen the hatchet attacking, which I believe only one of those things he probably saw, which is the hatchet attacks, which is why it's specifically said. It sounds to me like if they're attacking each other with hatchets, then this is the first Juggalo division of the ICP brigades.
Hey man,
or whatever.
when I was in Korea, they were selling Juggalo patches in the patch shop. So maybe that's actually like, you know, user packs got a fucking Juggalo unit. Here's the thing, right? So I think this is an example of the age-old problem of seeing or hearing of a problem, multiplying it times 1,000,000, and then deciding that enormous exaggeration is real. I would like to call this the British disease. Although it could also be the American conservative disease. I mean, like, let's be perfectly honest.
The officer's disease, it's really a class thing. It's I'm above you and I'm better.
So, like, I heard a soldier got caught for spice in a housing complex. So now I've multiplied that in my fevered racism brain times a million. And I've decided that the entire complex is run by the drug cartels. Some soldiers are fucking around, drinking too much and like brandishing their stupid axes or something dumb like that. Dumb soldier shit. I've decided they're having hatchet fights like they're fucking, like it's Conan the Barbarian. Some people had a barbecue and they were a little bit loud. I've decided that it's just drunken anarchy everywhere. You see what I mean? Like it's taking a thing and then just letting your imagination run rampant and then deciding that no, actually your imagination is true. It's the British disease, but let's be honest. It's also the letters to the editor disease, which this is. It's also the newspaper columnist disease. It's also the boomers on Facebook disease. It's wild. And this guy, unfortunately, forgot that if you do this, you could be exposed for it and sent a letter. And now he has become, I'm sure, like the epic bacon veterans are going nuts about this. But I want to continue the story because it's so far, it's funny. All right. So we continue. According to screenshots, the letter was sent February 8th via a Google email account to Housing. It began circulating last week on military community Facebook pages, and a YouTube video about the letter has garnered over 300,000 views as of Monday. The Yokosuka Housing Office declined Stars and Stripes requests for comment. Allison did not respond to attempts to reach him by email. The base hospital is investigating the letter for the strong remarks and language used, according to a response from Naval Hospital Yokosuka Commanding Officer Captain Carolyn Rice, posted Sunday by the hospital's Facebook page. I am aware of the recent allegation that a member of our staff sent a letter to the housing office with comments disparaging to enlisted service members, she wrote. We are conducting an internal investigation into the matter, and if any allegations are found to be true, we will take appropriate action.
What's the action you take on something like this? Like this is a glorified Nextdoor post, which like if you're not familiar with Nextdoor, imagine Facebook, but it's only your neighbors and they're all racist.
But that's the thing though, is that like this guy's a dumbass if he did send this, but let's be perfectly honest here, he didn't do anything illegal. He sent something like you could maybe ding him on a conduct unbecoming thing, but here's the thing, right? It's not a public statement. He sent an email and they leaked it. So you can't fucking ding a guy for that. Like that's their own dumb bullshit. Like you could absolutely do non-judicial punishment. You could be like, okay, if you sent this letter, then your commander pulls you in or whomever pulls you in, gives you a counseling statement saying what the fuck's wrong with you, don't do this. But like you did not break the law. And unless you had previously been instructed to not do this, you didn't violate a direct order. So yeah, I mean, maybe they could, but like, here's the thing, right? This is obviously a case of someone being a complete idiot, but ultimately the reason people know about this, the reason there's a scandal, et cetera, blah, 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 is because someone leaked it. So ultimately that comes down to the whomever working in the housing office who got this email and decided to leak it.
Yeah. There's somebody who read this email. They thought it was funny because it is over the top. I mean, obviously this guy sounds like an old British fogey talking about rum, sodomy, and the lash. And in a way it's true, but also, it's this guy sent an email to a private Gmail account and somebody put it out there with the guy's name. So like he's a dumbass, but also it's not his fault that this is out there.
No, not at all. That 100%, if it came down to it, like this guy would probably, I mean, ultimately, this would, depending on how it went.
If this was not the military, he could sue somebody, I would 100%. Feel.
And he might even be able to, I mean, quite frankly, he might be able to file an IG complaint against them for leaking that shit. And it would be substantiated. Now, it's not like he would get any money for it, but yeah, you could very easily, like, realistically speaking, this is a sort of thing where, like, if you are in a situation like this and this someone happens, like, he should, I mean, not to take this guy's side, but he should go to TDS because he could absolutely get that housing office hemmed up for this shit. So anyway, I'll continue the article. Allison's command is...
He should continue to be a huge dick, is what we're saying.
I mean, let me finish reading this, and then I want to get to my point, which I don't know if I want to... it would be very, very funny to read the letter, because just to the extent to which I feel there's some parallels in the way that's written with Trump voice, but we'll get to that later. Allison's command is working with the housing office to confirm the letter's authorship, hospital spokesman Erica Figueroa told Stars and Stripes in a phone call on Monday. It is under investigation, as is any case when someone allegedly acts in a way that is counter to our standards of behavior, she said. The letter states that officers are, quote, more respectable than enlisted members, and that Allison's children should, quote, only be friends with officers' children, and his wife only friends with officers' wives. He also expressed concern that his officer colleagues would not want to visit him in enlisted housing. The letter struck a nerve in some service members who said in Facebook comments they were disappointed that people in leadership positions may have such low opinions of them. Quote, understandably, emotions are high because some extremely offensive things were said. Military spouse and former Chicago resident Amy Hayes said in a Facebook message to Stars and Stripes on Monday, quote, any trust community members could have possessed for this man to serve hospital patrons without bias has been obliterated, unquote. Yeah, fair point. Navy veteran and Chicago resident Amber Barreo said she found the comments about her neighborhood unsettling. Quote, I always feel safe here, she said Monday in a Facebook message to Stars and Stripes. It's really upsetting because our community is always really helpful. We have support pages specifically for Chicago, and if anyone needs anything, they can make a post, and someone usually helps. Chicago is 7 miles from Yokosuka and features more than 800 housing units, a fitness center, a swimming pool, tennis courts, and a teen center, according to the base's website. All right, so 2 comments. First, that's the end of the story. So I want to go back to something. Let me see what I can say here. Folks, housing with Enlisted greatly increases the risk to my family. I have a very good-looking family, a wife and 2 daughters, aged 3 and 4. They're my prime targets to be victims of these deviant illicit activities. Yeah, it's wild. However, this is military.com, and many of you know I do want to say a couple of things. First of all, this is military.com, so I mean, it's clickbait. It's always clickbait. That's the way it works. Second,
That's why we're talking about it.
What is the best, Francis? What is the best part of military.com?
I don't know. What is it?
The fucking comments section. We know this. So let's go down. Right.
I just want to say that there are a lot of websites, a lot of news websites who have done away with comments because they're like, we realize that this doesn't actually help and it's very toxic. Like my local newspaper online doesn't really have comment sections, especially on opinion stuff. There's a lot of comment sections that have gone away, and comment sections on these websites, if you don't know, are generally run by YouTube. They're not YouTube, Facebook. So we're talking about people who want to comment on news stories and are still on Facebook. So imagine that's a double racism against you right there. Like if you are a person who actively uses Facebook and comments on military.com, I'm going to assume you're a huge idiot. You might not be, but I'm going to assume it. And I think Nate's going to show us why.
Okay. So the comments, the main comment section from what I can see here seems to be that they think that this is a frame job because it was sent from a Gmail account and blah, 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 that this is a, complain about it and that it's a setup and he didn't write it and that kind of a thing. So that's kind of lame.
A lot of people, there's a lot of enlisted people who are agreeing like, yeah, of course we are a bunch of crazy dumbasses. So, and like, that's the thing. This is not like enlisted people are not like, oh, I can't believe that the officers would shit talk us like this. Like the officers shit talk us constantly to our faces, like on a regular basis. This is just, some dumbass put it in writing. And now, a lot of people who claim to be Vietnam veterans, in here.
Yeah. Well, let me read this. This is a good one because this is just extremely, all right. Fellow enlisted deviant and pervert served in the U.S. Navy in Westpac during Vietnam with me. We're reminiscing just the other day. He mentioned if any of our squadron air crew were active duty in the U.S. Navy today, 3 things would happen. Number 1, we would all be under indictment. Number 2, we would all be ejected from the Navy as unsuitable with bad paper discharges. Number 3, our service to the country would have been a lot less fun in the country during the Cold War, and we would not have been as safe. As prior service deviant and pervert, unless those making comments step up and serve, they can kiss my fat butt. Anyway, thank you all for letting me vent. Now, where are the buy me drinky girls?
Buy me drink girls.
Yeah. So,
this is okay. This is another thing. Look, I'm not Nate. On this show, we are not people to disparage anybody's service, but like bragging about being a Cold War era veteran is just very strange to me.
Yeah.
Like this guy, I see there is somebody somewhere on my block when I'm walking the dog that has Cold War veteran, not a license plate, but like the little border around the license plate. Like even the state of Missouri is just like, no, we don't recognize Cold War era veterans, but I guess you can buy something online. There's I believe that probably most people in Vietnam would have been indicted if anybody really looked into it.
Oh my God. Jesus, these fucking boomers, they cannot stop themselves, man.
They can't, and they won't.
All right. Can't say I remember anybody running around the barracks with hatchets, but other than that, it does not appear much has changed since the early 1970s. Only rape I knew of occurred when a Wave Aviation storekeeper insisted on staying with the boys in the duty section bunk room over the weekend. Absolutely no excuse for what happened to her, but close quarters and rowdy people can lead to terrible consequences. In the end, she did not file charges because her, quote, boyfriend, unquote, was involved. I do not think the supply officer of the day, or CPO duty section leader knew she was there until it was over. Try standing at shore patrol in the enlisted members club on a Friday or Saturday night. I'm glad to not have to do that again. What?
I really want this officer, like, I want to do a rebuttal to this, but I'm just naming every flag officer involved in Fat Leonard, and it's going to be like 40 pages long because there are so fucking many of them, and they're all officers. So as deviant and hatch attacking as the enlisted folk are, like, don't get me wrong, we are a bunch of fucking deviant perverts, but also the officers are deviant perverts on just an entirely different
level. Yeah, exactly. I mean, and believe me, I have some wild stories. I remember there was a guy working at Brigade, the Brigade headquarters company, because he was, as I understand it, was actually a company commander, but got fired because it turned out he was illegal. You weren't allowed to rent off post accommodation in Korea if you were living on post. Like, not only you could not legally do it, on top of it not being paid for. So even if you wanted to rent your own place, you weren't allowed to. You had to live on post unless you were given off-post quarters, and you'd only get those quarters if you had a family with you and if you were for like an extended tour. If you were in Area 1, where I was, which sucked. And this guy had been not only illegally rented an apartment, was basically like using it as sort of like renting it out as like a sex party place, both like, like having sex parties and also, hey, I'll pay me $100 or $200 and you can use one of my bedrooms for the weekend to have sex or whatever. Like, it was, so yeah, like a flop house basically. So that guy got hemmed up for that. And that was actually very mild in terms of the shit that I've heard, but that was just the first thing that came to mind. All right, I got another one. Marine Todd actually signed up to military.com as Wave Rider 1, and he writes, wasn't this guy an enlisted? What kind of behavior did he engage in as an enlisted? Drop the LT in the funhouse in A stand, and then we'll see how he feels about enlisted when no one will have his six. Mustangs need corrective action too, not just the OCS and Academy kiddies. Every enlisted,
every military person who is under the assumption that the military is simply foot patrols and nothing else. Like, that's all anybody does. Like, yeah, well, let's see if anybody's got your six on a foot patrol. Bitch, I'm intelligence, or I'm public affairs. I don't do that. I don't do that dumb grunt shit for a fucking reason.
This one is from retired Article 15 chief, all in caps. This is the start of the woke world. It's now affecting our great military. Liberals stay with liberals and conservatives stay with conservatives. OMG, people, just get along and stop whining on things that don't matter. Jeez. What the fuck does that have to do with anything? Like, here you have a huge, clear example of like class discrimination. I mean, also, do we know if this letter is real or not? I have no fucking clue. And you're like, it's a fucking woke liberals. Like, what are you talking about?
Right. Who's being canceled here? Is it the enlisted for hatchet attacking one another? Because that probably should stop. Like, I am going to agree with the good lieutenant here and say that you should not have enlisted people attacking each other with hatchets. Now, what I think probably happened is they don't have a good axe throwing bar, because that's like the big thing now. So a bunch of enlisted folk, got a case of Milwaukee's Best and a couple of hatchets and a bit of plywood and just went to fucking town one day. Like anybody, any group of people under the age of fucking 22 will do. If you give them plywood and a hatchet, they're going to start throwing the hatchet at the plywood. That's just nature. That's just nature running its course. And I'm sorry that this guy doesn't understand that. But if they are attacking each other with hatchets, that should be kind of put a kibosh on that.
Weirdly, there is actually a pretty good comment here where someone says, someone basically responded like, it wouldn't surprise me if there was a whole lot of truth in what this naval lieutenant wrote. And it's like, and people are responding saying, hey, well, yeah, there probably are problems, but he did it the wrong way by contacting the base housing authority, who is run by civilians, which, I mean, like I said, this is all really stupid, etc. But somebody writes, responding to this, basically saying there isn't these kind of problems. They said, There isn't, it's a grossly exaggerated. If he was talking about having to live in an all-male infantry barracks with his family, then yes, there would be some serious issues, but still not the ones he's speaking about. He is typical of what you still see in the Navy. He's very much aware of his class, and if you look at the Navy, it is very much a class-oriented system. Nothing to do with anything else, just class. Enlisted are the servants and officers of the nobility, and it's how it's looked at by a lot of folks, and the Academy fleet grads are the absolute worst about this. The Marines still make fun of the Navy for how it does certain things just in the galley. And it's like, yeah, that 100% gets my... what's it called? The impression that I've gotten of the Navy, where like the level of enlisted segregation, et cetera, that you see is pretty intense. And I think the Army like used to be that way. And there is a new sort of system here that kind of it aggressively discourages that. You know what I mean? When I hear my dad's stories about stuff in the Army, like there were officers clubs and like you were sort of pressured to join them. And now the only place I ever knew of where there was an officers club was on Benning. And like, yeah, cool. But like, how long did guys like me, I was never stationed at Benning for a unit. I was just stationed there for training. So I lived there for like 9 months, of which 2.5 months were spent in Ranger School. And then I was there for like 7 months for the career course. And then I was gone. So the idea of joining an officers club, like, come on, man.
O clubs and E clubs are pretty much gone.
They're all ranks clubs and officers never go to them. And they're civilian run too. Like they used to be like organizations that the service members had to like manage and staff themselves. And that's like, we had them in Honduras and that was like a weird anachronism. Like they absolutely don't have them anymore.
Yeah. And it's basically it just turned into like, well, rather than have separate O and E clubs, this is just where the bowling alley is and everybody can come here and hang out. And that's just the bar and the dance club and the bowling alley is all one thing now, depending on which base you're at. It was certainly that way on Fort McCoy.
Got some other good comments. All right, here's one. Some of the things described in the letter were things that made my Navy career friggin' awesome. Cry laugh emoji, cry laugh emoji, cry laugh emoji, cry laugh emoji.
Okay, here's one. The Navy still has a very separate class system. Look at the crime logs. How many officers are committing such crimes? True, such crimes the officers are not committing. Too many problems are being allowed to serve to fill the ranks. Bring back the draft with very few exceptions. Do it right this time. So the answer to all this crime that we have in the military is to force people to be in the military, which, Nate, I've been doing a lot of reading about Vietnam and the anti-war movements, and it was not great for people who wanted to be in the Army to be around people who didn't want to be in the Army. People who didn't want to be in the Army fucked with stuff constantly.
Yeah, and more power to them, because fuck the state coercing you to go be, be the prisoner of the state to do imperialism. That sucks. Don't do it.
There's a guy that made a ship go completely unable to be used for 8 months by dropping a paint chipper down into the engine. Trust me, there are some ways that these people will fuck some stuff up. So obviously we're against the draft because no state should force anybody to go fight a war of imperialism, but also I'm against the draft just as a soldier because I wouldn't want to be surrounded by somebody who really doesn't want to be there. Like nobody wants to be in the Army, but at least it was your decision to join if you did.
Yeah. Well, one person basically complains and says, hey, this is stupid cut and paste journalism. Like maybe there should be some facts involved here before we start accusing stuff. And a guy responds, I agree with you wholeheartedly. Man, do we like to jump to conclusions. We should all be in great physical shape from doing so. Facts? I don't need any stinking facts. I'm so glad that I retired and I'm living out in the middle of nowhere. Fly Army.
Okay, so here's one. Unfortunately, it has a lot of truth attached to it. I've seen and heard some crazy, wild, and shameful stuff going on around base, specifically the housing areas, and that was a while ago. I can't imagine it's improved any. Response from Fast Mover Fixerel Deluxe. Back in the 70s in Elmendorf Air Force Base, there was a lot of, quote, wife-swapping parties going on in the lower-grade officer housing. So how do I know? Lower and mid-ranking NCOs mixed with LTs, captains, and some majors, mostly pilots, by word of mouth and tracks of the fresh snow crisscrossing to the officers' flats. At first, I didn't believe it, but it turned out to be true. You can figure out how that got out. So apparently in the 70s, Elmendorf Air Force Base was just a whole lot of going on.
I was stationed at Richardson, which is attached to Elmendorf. So, it's not much to do when it's that cold. Can't even really train that much unless you're doing Arctic training. So, yeah, just be fucking. Get your PT.
You take your buddy's wife or husband out for a spin.
Fucking Christ.
There's another, when we were on Elmendorf, my dad was in the Alaskan Air Command. That sort of thing may have gone on then, but if my dad, a chief master sergeant, heard about it, he only told our mom. And no, they didn't get involved in any of that. There were also drugs back on the base back then. Well, of course they were. It was the 60s. Like this guy's dad sounds like, this guy's dad sounds like you, where it's just a very Boy Scout of an officer who's just like, I just want to do my job. And I don't know that there's a lot of fuck parties and drugs going on.
I don't want to be doing these weird swinger parties. I just want to grill, for God's sake. Just give me a 4 day so I can fucking grill. That's what I want to do. All right, Francis, we've grill, not drill. God damn it. We've plumbed the depths of the military.com comments. I'm going to be honest with you. They weren't as good as they normally are. This one didn't provoke enough insane outrage from Marine Todd to actually, I appreciated that there was a drop him in the fucking stand so we can get killed because these motherfuckers. I do appreciate when someone completely melts down like that. But there wasn't really enough of it. However, for the last 10 minutes, we did want to talk about another thing that we've been made aware of, which hilariously, I didn't realize was a thing. And apparently it's been around for a long time, which is a musical called Bad Apples that is about the Abu Ghraib scandal. And this was brought to our attention because of a viral tweet. And I'm just going to read the 4 paragraphs about this from a review of this musical that we saw on this tweet, because it's so unreal that my mind's been blown. I think if we did the full article, I would just have a conniption fit. So I'm going to read this. The characters, they're being referred to here, are based on the real-life perpetrators of Abu Ghraib, at least as far as the American media was concerned. Lindy England, Charles Granner, and to a lesser extent, Megan Ambule. Granner was sexually involved with both women. Chuck is involved with both Lindsay and Tamiko. Those are the names of the characters. But the storylines start to diverge there. In this version, Chuck also gets the women to sleep with one another and gets them both pregnant, facts that I haven't seen pop up in the many articles on Abu Ghraib I've read. This isn't a history, so accuracy isn't an issue, but what I take issue with is the choice to artificially ramp up drama in a story this salacious. The backstory is Chuck's tragic family death, Skinner's ill mother and racist stepfather, Scott's wife and child are largely invented. Why humanize people and sensationalize them at the same time? Humanizing seems to be the goal here, exploring how a few lonely people ended up drowning in an impossible situation, doing awful things they thought they were supposed to, and taking the fall for systems enacted by their own government. But it's also ostensibly a love story, which the central relationships never bore out. Not once did I feel how much these people loved each other, or at least needed each other in such desperate circumstances. But how could they, when we also have to squeeze in a mustache-twirling military spin doctor, cameos by Dick Cheney and Donald Rumsfeld, a very long scene of 9/11 hijackers ordering pizza on their last night on Earth, Skinner's legal defense, and a few underused Abu Ghraib prisoners that felt more like props than people. The overstuffed show repeatedly introduces ancillary characters in full scenes to illustrate concepts that could have been much more quickly and organically integrated. We don't need to hear that WMDs were never found in Iraq from Donald Rumsfeld. We can learn how underqualified contractors put together interrogation plans without meeting those contractors. I'm a little weirded out by the concept of something that basically involves humanizing the people who tortured people, but not humanizing the people who get tortured. That to me is like the first enormous red flag.
There are absolutely conversations to be had about how normal people turn into torturers or murderers or mass murder, like, the mentality of just the person to be like, yeah, I go along with whatever authority figures tell me to do. There is definitely a conversation, many conversations psychologically that can happen there. And certainly the instigators of the Abu Ghraib prison scandal should be a part of that. However, at the same time, I do not think a rock opera is the best way to convey these things. Certainly, I understand that they're saying that this isn't historical, but you should at least have some sort of accuracy if you're going to base this off of a thing that actually happened. Like, if you want to have a conversation about how does a normal person, from the age of 10, I want to grow up and I want to be, an astronaut, I want to be a firefighter. How do they turn into a horrific torturer? That's certainly a discussion to have, but this is just like... Yeah, even one of the pictures is 2 women kissing while one is holding a fucking pistol in her hand.
I also got to be honest with you too that I would strongly recommend, and I'm giving you a content warning beforehand because it's very intense. I would strongly recommend, if you only recall Abu Ghraib from the headlines at the time or the TV reporting at the time, or you were too young to recall that or to be aware of it, if you are able to handle some incredibly disturbing imagery and subject matter, just simply read the Wikipedia, which has lots of the photos that were not published in newspapers included in there. And I feel as though once you've read the Wikipedia article about the Abu Ghraib torture scandal, you will have a much different opinion about the entirety of it, because you'll realize that they did throw the junior enlisted people under the bus. But the really galling thing is that basically their leaders who were aware of it, absolutely aware of it, were not punished to any meaningful degree. And so while Lindy England was, as I understand it, sentenced to prison and then dishonorably discharged, and some of the other people were dishonorably discharged or reduced in rank but allowed to be retained. For example, their commander, the unit commander, who was a brigadier general, was reduced in rank to a colonel but still allowed to retire. And, when you see this stuff happen and you realize that there wasn't any real true reckoning for this, they found some people they could throw under the bus, but like it did not address the system that allowed this to happen. And when you see those photos and you see just how fucking depraved it was, you don't really have a lot of sympathy. I mean, I feel an intrinsic sense of sympathy when you see like the junior ranking people getting punished and the senior ranking people being more or less allowed to walk from it. Mm-hmm. But it's very hard to have any more sympathy beyond that sort of miscarriage of justice just sort of on its face when you see the absolute abomination that was perpetrated on the victims there. Like when you see those pictures, like what you've seen in newspapers and magazines only scratches the absolute fucking surface, like the absolute most superficial amount. It is so unbelievably depraved. And some of the reporting that you'll see that was not just reporting that was anecdotal, but this is testimony from people in court about basically trying to interrogate people, like, for example, by having, and I'm going to warn you, this involves sexual violence, having Iraqi police rape underage minor detainees because they are like the children of other detainees and forcing them to watch their own children being raped. Like that's one of the things that was in the testimony. It's like, when you look at that shit, it's just like, there's not really a word in English to describe how much of an abomination it was. And so to me, like, I didn't know this musical existed. I mean, my content brain says talk more about it. The vestigial remnants of my human brain say, no, fuck this. This is a nightmare. But I think really more than anything else, I'm very wary of wanting to humanize and explore and contextualize and complicate the perpetrators of this without giving even like the slightest consideration to the victims, considering that even if you know of it as this horror show, unless you've really gone through the stuff, it's hard to communicate just how fucking awful it is. And I think you'll have the same reaction if you have it in you to go through that stuff.
Yeah, if you wanna, I don't know, read or learn or do anything, have any kind of input into learning about group psyche and stuff, Joe from Lions Led by Donkeys, he suggested a book called Ordinary Men, the Reserve Police Battalion 101 and the Final Solution in Poland. And it's basically about how these were just like some average middle-aged Germans who weren't in the military. They weren't even in the police. Like they were just like, hey, you guys are just like, be the neighborhood watch, I guess. Just be around here because you're too old to join or you're too infirm or whatever. And how they ended up becoming like one of the biggest mass murdering, cold-blooded units. Just ordinary people, just how they become these horrific, insane things. And, you know, I do believe that we should absolutely study these things from a psychological point and see, how did it get there? How do we keep this from happening again? How do we adjust how we think? And I think that those things are best done in books and papers and studies, not in a 3-hour rock opera that requires 2 intermissions and has 9/11 hijackers eating pizza before they hijack and do 9/11. I would just say that there's probably better mediums for something like this. That's just me. You know what? I'm not a musical producer, so what the fuck do I know, I guess. You can actually hear some of the songs from this on their SoundCloud. It is not great. It's not bad. I'm not going to say like, oh, it's shitty music, but it is very generic. Like it's like somebody was just like, man, what if all the generic shit rock from the 90s, all the butt rock that everybody listened to, what if that was about Abu Ghraib? There you go.
Yeah, man.
Now you got a 3-hour musical.
Yeah, man. Well, it's just one of those things that I think that some of the ripple effects from how American culture decided to interpret what we did, what happened on 9/11 and then what we did, has become so detached from anything besides the idea of like, why do I feel so sad about what America did to people? You know what I mean? Like, without considering for a second that, I mean, yeah, you have a right to feel weirded out by it, but like, your feeling of discomfort is probably not as significant as the after effects of all of the violence and injustice perpetuated, on the victims of which you and me, Francis, were a part. Even if we didn't do the actions, we still wore the same uniform and we're in the same, more or less the same command structure and all these things. Like, it's a thing that I think a lot of people just need to wrap their heads around, the idea that, in a country where people are being disappeared and tortured by people wearing the same uniform as you, like you aren't any different. You are part of that organization that is committing that injustice, even if you aren't touching it. And I think that's a thing that a lot of people don't want to wrap their heads around, because it's much easier to be like, oh, well, like my service was cool and good. And it's like, look, man, you could be the most humanitarian and open-minded and caring and person who wants to buck the system and fix things and be kind and be empathetic and like be open-minded and like all those things. It doesn't matter. Somewhere like half a mile down the road, someone is pissing in Gatorade bottles and throwing them at kids. You know what I mean? And they're wearing the same uniform as you. And ultimately, yeah, it sucks. It fucking sucks. So don't want to end on too much of a down note, but yes, I think that I think we don't necessarily need to watch a 3-hour rock opera about having a pizza party before you do 9/11, among other things. However,
I would say if you're gonna watch a cop opera or watch a rock opera, watch Copra, which is the cop rock, Cop Rock, which was cop opera, which is absolutely terrible, but at least like it was in the 70s, so there's some great 70s cop mustaches.
I think it's the 80s actually, but yes.
Is it?
Yeah, it's the 80s. It was I think it may actually have come out in 1990, but I think it was like produced and filmed in the late 80s. So yes, it was first aired on ABC in 1990. Cop Rock. Yeah.
Dark comedy, musical, crime drama. Opening theme is Under the Gun, performed by Randy Newman, of all people.
Weird. Well, anyway, we have a bonus this week on the topic of, you guessed it, the non-veteran, veteran valor stealer, weird right-wing figure, Madison Cawthorn, featuring you and friend of the show, Jasper Craven. So, Francis, do you want to introduce that?
Yeah, Jasper wrote a great article about the weird kind of thing that's around Madison Cawthorn, where he's not a veteran. He's kind of lied about, like he wanted to join the Naval Academy and is like, oh, I couldn't join because, I was in this car accident. But the Naval Academy's like, no, we just weren't letting you in general. Like your legs had nothing to do with it. But how he's like very like seems very military, because he's like he's good looking, square jawed. He's in the wheelchair. He loves guns and he loves America. So obviously the first thing you think is like, oh, look at this poor wounded veteran. And really he's just an asshole who is in a car accident. And instead of like having a life-changing moment of like, maybe I should stop being an asshole, was just like, well, I can't use the military to further my political career, so I guess I'm going to go ahead and use this. And how he's just really like kind of a reactive figure that does nothing other than put out insane bills that do nothing for nobody, and how he's probably going to be around forever because he looks good and he sounds good and he says all the right things to all the right people. So we're probably stuck with this guy until all of us are dead. So enjoy that and enjoy this.
I think it's quite possible that he flames out, that one scandal just engulfs him and he's unable to bounce back from it. I mean, the other thing is that his state, North Carolina, would pretty much be blue if there weren't, like voter suppression efforts by the Republican Party. So the idea of him like winning a Senate seat in North Carolina seems dicey, but maybe he doesn't have to do that if he can just sort of like seize on the moment and become popular enough in the sort of far right segment of Republican politics. The reason I think that he will be successful is that so far he has been inundated with scandal after scandal, and he has brushed them all aside. I think that he really does sort of possess some of the Teflon qualities of Trump. I mean, these are incredibly serious, incredibly well-reported allegations. You know, dozens of women essentially saying he was very sketchy and sexually harassing of them for, you know, many, many months at this school he went to, Patrick Henry College. There is Instagram evidence of him at the what is it, the bunker, the crow's nest?
Yeah, the crow's nest.
Like talking, you know, just jovially about how he was happy to, you know, check this one off the bucket list because how cool the Fuhrer is, essentially. I mean,
right.
It's all out there how much.
If you're on a dictator assassination world tour, fucking all about it. Like, hey, this is the bunker where Hitler shot himself. Go fuck yourself, Hitler. Next up, we're gonna go to, you know, we're gonna go piss on the grave of Idi Amin. It's gonna be a great time. But like, yeah, you get this like here we are at the crow's nest, and it's like, okay, this can either go really good or really bad, and you're a Republican, so I am concerned. And go figure it. It turns out.
I'm really impressed with his resiliency. And one thing you cannot take away from Madison Cawthorn is that he was truly able to claw his way back after a horrific car crash. And that, I think he also just gets the power that comes along with this sheen of like military service. I mean, if you look at all of the most reactionary political figures today, so many of them have a military background. And they have been able to spew really toxic rhetoric in part because they have this protection. People won't question them. People won't really take them down as much when they know that they didn't serve and they feel guilt about it, but that this politician, no matter how toxic they think they are, did serve. And so, I mean, like, you know, there's Tom Cotton. There's Pete Hegseth. There's what's the other guys who did like the Antifa Marvel
Crenshaw, my favorite.
Yeah.
Now that Duncan Hunter's gone, Crenshaw has to be my default favorite.
Yeah. So and these guys, I mean, they're becoming stars of the Republican Party. And maybe if if there's some sort of paradigm shift where the military truly becomes reviled in America, or the public no longer trusts the military, or exhaustion with Pentagon spending, or, you know, the forever wars really hits like a zenith, then yeah, maybe the military veneer that Cawthorn has built no longer counts. But as long as he's able to sustain that on the right, I think he'll only keep moving up the ladder.
Well, and I do also think that there's there's an argument that, you know, ever since Biden became president, then you see the people like Mikuya, the guy who claims that he shot bin Laden, tweeting things like, I regret or I'm embarrassed to have ever killed for my country, which is like one of the most just like fucked things to ever that's a fucked thing to say, unless you're like, I regret killing people for my country because the wars are wrong and I shouldn't have been there. But no, it's just like, I regret this because now because now like the military is saying that women are people too, and how dare they? And that's, you know, going forward in, you know, this quote feminization of the military that everybody's so concerned about. The talking point then becomes, we need to go back to how things were before, which is, you know, unrelenting war for no reason and no general outcome and no mission goals or anything like that. I remember distinctly in 2017, you know, roughly after Trump won, being on Fort Carson, Colorado for a class, and just, you know, out at the smoke deck talking to people, and a lot of people saying, well, at least we're going to get to take the gloves off in Afghanistan. I'm like, guys, that's not why we're losing. Like, you don't, like, even on the ground floor, people aren't truly understanding the conflict in Iraq and Afghanistan. And I don't know, they're just, it's just always been there. So what's there to understand? We've always been at war with Eurasia is kind of the talking point here. So, it's very easy to say, like, look, all of this, the military is no longer this loved aspect of, no longer this loved institution of America, and we have to get back to doing that. But like, the way of doing that is by becoming more violent and reactionary, and everything that you see in Dan Crenshaw's weird little video game thing where he jumps out of an airplane and parachutes down. It's like, also, like, I hope he didn't shoot that when like Texas was fucking frozen solid and nobody had any electricity or anything. Maybe you should have parachuted into that shit. Who knows? They're never reacting to the right things. It's reactionary politics, but reactions to the wrong and just the weirdest things. So going forward, what I guess, I mean, like you said, he's really got that Teflon thing, but you interviewed him, so what is it like, just even talking to him?
I mean, I think he's good. He gets it. He's very disarming over the phone. He's perfectly nice. He's good at small talk. Like, I mean, obviously those are little things, but he knows that journalists, many of them, like to get their egos puffed and like will sort of go easy if they view their subject as a human, not like a, asshole or an enemy. So, he just did little things like saying, wow, what a wise, like, I asked him one question basically, about how he's talking up how great his VA is, and, that his dad goes to the VA in North Carolina and really loves it, but yet he's like super opposed to universal health care. Why is that? And he was like, that's a very wise question. And then just like spewed off a bunch of like political nonsense that didn't answer it. So, and he's also like one of those people who knows he has a good grasp of like political language, and, throws in enough 25-cent words that it sort of sounds coherent and thoughtful. But it's not really. And again, like, this is, I think a lot of this comes from his background as a motivational speaker. He really knows how to tell a compelling story and sort of like, bullshit through something, when necessary.
I gotta say, I had no idea he was a motivational speaker. I guess that's after his accident.
Yeah.
Okay.
Yeah.
Cause and that makes sense. Like, if you're out there, like I have been to corporate events where there have been motivational speakers, and it's a stage play. Like, it's very impressive. I went, the one that really sticks out in my head is, one of the guys, from Shark Tank, Diamond. I can't remember his first name. The guy who created Fubu and, been around for a while, but he had this like, it was a whole production. There was lights, there was a video, there was all this stuff that like he gets paid to just come out and talk to a bunch of accountants to pump them up for something. I don't know what, because he's an entrepreneur and we're all they were a bunch of accountants. I was an IT guy that managed to tag along. So it is like, it's a very strange siren call if you have the ability to be a motivational speaker, and you really can. It does feel like you can kind of get away with anything, because you're a motivational speaker, because you know how to talk, because like you said, you know how to tell a story. So that's, that's starting to make Madison Cawthorn make a lot more sense to me.
Yeah, absolutely. And, he's good at pivoting. He's good at taking a charged question that's critical of him and just sort of brushing it off and attacking whomever has made a charge against him. I asked him about the stolen valor charge and said, there's a lot of vets who seem pretty pissed off you're now on the House Veterans Affairs Committee because you didn't serve. Like, what do you have to say to that? And, he quickly, went to his lines that he said a million times about how the left is lying. They can't, they're afraid of him. They don't want to debate him on the issue, so they make these false attacks. Again, sort of Trumpian stuff, knowing how to reverse a question and sort of, become dominant and aggressive pretty quickly.
All right, everybody. As always, you can follow me at Army Strang, follow Nate at In These Deserts, and follow the podcast. We're on YouTube. We're everywhere you want to be. So thank you all for your support. Thank you for being Patreon subscribers if you are, and thank you for sharing our show with all the people that you have around. So for Nate and for me, thank you, and we'll talk to you next week.